part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
And welcome to another Reghi Roda podcast powered by Cleveland Party Rentals and Newark Auto Body right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. And before we get rolling, shout out to our fantastic producer, Ty Quartz, who always makes things easy for us to get this out to you in the podcatosphere. So a tip of the cap to you, Ty. And Michael, we've got a very special guest joining us tonight. We always love talking with this gentleman, whether it's on a podcast, when we did it on our radio show, or whenever we see him at the ballpark, the football field, or the basketball arena. So why don't you introduce our special guest here tonight?
Well, Kenny, of course, I'd love to do that. And yes, every opportunity we get to chat with Terry Pluto, the faith and sports columnist now for both the Plain Dealer and Cleveland.com. And of course, I'm sure many of you go back to the days that Terry was with the Akron Beacon Journal as well. And of course, we always appreciate his time and always the main thing is getting his insights on all the teams that you fans love to follow here in Cleveland. So Terry, we greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much. And how about we start tonight with the Guardians?
How about we start with your birthday?
My birthday.
Very good, Terry. Another trip around the sun successfully made, Michael Reghi.
Yes. I hope it'll maintain success for the next year anyway. But thank you very much, gentlemen, for the birthday greetings. I greatly appreciate that. Terry also has a June birthday, by the way.
Okay. So early wishes to you too, Terry.
Yes, Terry. This month of June. He'll celebrate as well. All right, Mr. Pluto. Let's start with the Guardians because I mean this baseball team, I think has caught the fancy of everybody that loves Cleveland Indians, now Guardians baseball. So here they sit, Terry. We're about 64 games deep into the season, so 42-22, 4 games up on Kansas City, and Stephen Vogt is the biggest thing for me. Terry, did you feel that? I mean, look, following Terry Francona is no easy task. It's no easy act for anyone. Stephen Vogt has handled this wonderfully well. And your thoughts on the job he's done, and with the onus, if you will, of following a Terry Francona, one of the most successful managers in the game as well.
Well, a couple of things went his way. Let's start with that. First was that last year was Francona's worst year here. They're 76-86. So it's not as if he took over a team that, was 92-70 like they were in 22. The reason I mention that is expectations for a new manager coming in, especially a guy who is, less than 2 years away from playing, are important. Where I think I'll tell you how far off I was. I picked them to be 72-90. And I really thought the bullpen, had nothing to do with the manager, frankly. I just thought the bullpen would be a disaster. You look back at Class A, the previous 3 years have been in more games than anybody else. And they just couldn't. You saw Trevor Stephan was hurt. And I don't know, is James Karinchak even on the same planet? I don't know where that was at. Even when he was here, was always a little bit in doubt. And so you just kind of saw, how are they going to piece all that together? Because regardless of who the manager is, if you have a bad bullpen, you look like an idiot. It's as simple as that. And what has turned out to be, I thought, was going to be a big weakness. And I could tell you, and Tom Hamilton will admit it too, because Tom and I are pretty close. He was the first one that I remember right after the first of the year, we were talking about the team, and Tom goes, "Well, I don't know about this bullpen." And, so we both had doubts. And of course, to show what any of us know, it's the best bullpen in baseball. I mean, it's not just good, it's been the best. And that has really helped Vogt. I think the fact they started 8-2 was another good thing that helped him. And finally, this has been, to me, a testimony not only to him, but the entire organization. Because if you look at, did they change the pitching coach? No. Did they change the hitting coach? No. They made a couple of Mike Starbaugh's gone, and they brought in Alvarez as a kind of folks main bench coach. Sandy's still at first base. He's the catching coach. And so you look at all those things, they plugged in a talented young guy to a system that was already in place with a highly successful tenure of, I think, I'm trying to remember, Carl, I think it's been here like 7 or 8 years, and the hitting coach like 3, but also, Sandy's been there forever. So they kind of have their guardian way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that said, he could mess this whole thing up too. If he were not emotionally able to handle the ups and downs, mostly he's had ups, but nonetheless, or if suddenly he felt that he had to kind of put my stamp on the team, and that instead he's been very gracious about Francona. He's come up with the hard 90s as the way they played, but that's how they played in 22. If you remember that, I mean, they led the league in infield hits back then, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were just to drop in on any press conference, win or lose or whatever, and ask yourself, is this a rookie manager? Has he been around like 5 years? I think most of us would say he's been around 5 years.
Terry, I had him winning 76 games. So you and I were on the same planet. Okay. And I just looked at it and said their biggest signing was Austin Hedges. They added no offense to this team, right? I was concerned about Bieber and McKenzie, right? Would they even be able to pitch this year? And sure, Bieber's done, but McKenzie's hanging in there, I guess. But I'm as shocked.
Williams is not there.
Exactly. So there's 3/5 of your starting rotation with question marks, right? And yet here they are after today's win at Miami, 42-22, 4 games up on the Royals. And as you mentioned, the bullpen, we were down at the ballpark on the Kenny and JT show, and Hammy said what you said he said, and that was, it's the bullpen. That's why this team is in first place. But I also want to give some love to Jose Ramirez because I'm looking at his numbers right now, guys. 275, 18 homers, 62 RBIs, 50 runs scored, 10 stolen bases. And he's carried this offense with a little help from David Fry and Stephen Kwan when he's been in there. But this is Jose Ramirez's team. If he can just continue to get some help like this, who knows what this team could do in this division.
And Naylor's hit enough behind him that they stopped walking Jose. Now, Naylor's cooled off, but he came out with a hot start. That was another thing. And if you really want to, like you said, it's the thing, see what Michael thinks about this, where I think from the moment Lindor was traded, and then when Jose, especially after he decided to stay in 22, he made it his team. And I was watching the other night, I don't know if you saw when he hit a home run, but right before that, Kwan had been thrown out stealing. And they showed in the dugout where Jose came over to Kwan afterwards, and this is after Jose hit the home run and Kwan had been not picked off, but thrown out. And you could see Jose was showing him something about his slide into second base or something like that. It was hard to tell, but it wasn't like, you're dumb for getting thrown out, but it was like, hey man, we do it this way. And you've seen that before with him with other guys.
Yeah.
And Frank Cohen always said, when your best player plays as hard as Jose Ramirez, it makes it a lot easier on the manager.
Absolutely agree. I think it's one of the biggest things that has taken place with this baseball team, and Jose Ramirez accepting this kind of role because, Terry, we've seen his ascent as a player in the last half a dozen years. There's never been any question about that, but I'll be honest, I never thought we'd be using the term leader to tie in with Jose Ramirez. Just didn't. I didn't see him as that type of guy. Come in, I'm gonna do my job. Always. I don't know. I sometimes I felt Jose kind of hid behind the language barrier a little bit because, but that's not the first time that's happened around Major League Baseball. But I was wrong because I never saw him become this type of clubhouse force and this type of or have these type of leadership roles that he's shown. I think it's incredible. In addition to his ascent year in and year out as one of the top players in baseball.
You know, the other thing you mentioned, Austin Hedges, and Jose was texting them. He wanted Austin Hedges back.
Really?
Hedges was one of the guys that helped him in
Wow.
the clubhouse.
Wow.
And yes, very tight with Hedges. And so, and also, if you watch periodically, Vogt will put Hedges out there with a starter who's struggling. You know, a guy who's going to be having a hard, all of a sudden Hedges pops up to catch that guy. And I don't care if he's hitting 101. I mean, you argue all these. He's doing, it's not just, I've had to say, well, just let him be the coach and the mascot. No, they want him. The fact that he's on the field, he is playing. And when you watched him work pitchers behind the plate, it's a different situation than with some of these other catchers. It just is. I'll tell you, Fry's amazed me how well he's taken to catching. But you know, Hedges brings something special at different times. And the fact that the reason they went with 3 catchers is so that they could turn around if they have to pinch hit for him or whatever. But I know the Guardians, this goes back to the early years of Francona. Chris Antonetti told me once, he said, you know, Tito brought in more and more of the clubhouse dynamic, you know, trying to measure what it is. Remember, Jason Giambi he had different guys over time that he loved. And he said it took us to a higher level. He goes, we've even kind of studied it, try to quantify it. Can't really put a number on it. You know, it's sort of like, but you know it when you see it.
Mm.
And so that's been, they felt, one of the ingredients that's helped them. So if you go back now, you know, for 11 years of Francona, let's just make this year 12. They're not going to have a losing season this year. So there's going to be 2 losing seasons out of that period of time. Entering the season, only the Dodgers and Yankees had a better regular season record than Cleveland. And, you know, it's the old, they always talk Oakland with the money ball, but these are the money ball guys. And even when they make some mistakes, they seem to be able to figure out ways to get around them. I mean, I think one of the most underrated moves was they decided to put Freeman in center field. And I think they had it in their mind that Straw was going to the minors unless Freeman just looked terrible in spring training. And that's tough when, you know, you give this guy this contract and he's not playing well. You know, it'd be easy to turn around and say, hey, you know, we got to keep him in the roster. But they didn't do that. And I also like the fact that, you know, I thought it was a bad idea to sign Laureano.
Yep.
And to their credit, okay, they wrote it off.
Yep.
I mean, this is what you do when you think you got a chance to win. You know, I'm not talking about when you do it on the money ball way or the, you know, they always say winning on the margins.
When you look at this team, Terry, and Terry Pluto is our guest, outstanding writer, Cleveland.com, plain dealer, many books, and we'll mention his latest book that's out now. Can they maintain this, Terry? And what would you like to see them add by July 30?
Well, they're playing 667 baseball, so the answer is no.
Okay.
No.
Yep.
Can they win middle 90s game? Because, you know, if you do that, well, I don't know, you win 108 games or some crazy total. But I guess, I mean, because it's not like you sit there and go, well, everything's gone right. Everything hasn't gone right.
Right.
Ebert, I mean, I'll tell you, I've never seen one of these things. I remember when they had that, they called that emergency press conference with us, and they say, oh, Bieber's going on the disabled list. And in fact, I asked Antonetti on the press conference, I said, Chris, the guy's thrown 12 scoreless innings and struck out 20, and you mean he needs Tommy John surgery? And he said, he does. I mean, and of course, I'm not questioning Bieber or anything. Last thing Bieber wants in a free agent year is Tommy John surgery.
Right.
So he goes down. Gavin Williams picks up a weighted ball in spring training, and we haven't seen him. Now he's pitching at Columbus, but we haven't seen him yet. We're into June. As you mentioned, I mean, McKenzie's been up and down. I get some people emailing me trashing Carrasco. I'm like, and your alternative is who?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Excuse me, who is it?
And I laughed when they signed him, Terry, in spring training. I thought it was, they're just doing him a solid or whatever. But here he is, one of the, I don't want to say important starters, but at least he's out there. What's the best availability, right? And he is.
Remember Luis Giolito, and who was that other guy? Syndergaard they had? Those
Right.
guys. I mean, that was really, and you look around baseball, everybody's got 2 or 3 starters on the injured list. It's not just Cleveland, it's everywhere. But in terms of Carrasco, first of all, I love those kind of deals. You bring a guy in, if he doesn't make it, fine. But I look back to his year with the Mets, 2 years. It's only 2 years ago, and he kind of slopped his way through 5 and a third innings all the time. I forgot whether he won 12 games or he was useful, and so that was it. And I also knew the old thing: whatever he had left, they were going to get out of him. And then Chris also told me, he said, we really think he could help us in the bullpen because you forget, that's when they straightened him out way back when. They put him in the bullpen. Francona did that with Carl Willis, got him fixed, changed his motion around. They just wanted another veteran arm, but he's helped them. And if he only goes 4 and a third innings or 2/3, what do you want to do? Have a bullpen game instead? Where a guy throws 2 innings or 1 inning? I mean,
Yeah, right.
No, seriously, this is modern baseball. This is
Right, right. Right. And Kenny, Terry, with all of these potential landmines with the pitching staff, right, that we're just speaking of. I mean, as I look today, they're 6th in all of Major League Baseball, pitching to a 3.42 ERA.
Yeah.
Now, again, if you would have told me that, I would have told you absolutely not. That isn't going to happen. And yet it has. When you can pitch and when your bullpen can stay stable, you've got a chance to do special things. And the Yankees are pitching to a 2.87 ERA right now. So they're number 1 in baseball, but here are the Indians at 3.42, and the bullpen is holding up extremely well. So Terry, I mean, and again, do you see this 660 clip maintaining and staying? It's difficult to do, I know, but that means AL Central Division Championship, a playoff run, and hopefully, I mean, that's legitimate now for the next 3.5 months.
Yeah, guys, if they play 500 ball the rest of the way, they win 91 games.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that'll get you in the playoffs most times, right?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Yeah, it should. And then also, I mean, now you've had a couple remarkable things happen. Ben Lively, who had a 4.1 ERA in 2.5 years in the KBO, if you remember the COVID days on ESPN. Mm-hmm. You would have actually seen Ben Lively pitch in some of those games. He was there for 2.5 years. In the major leagues going this year, his ERA was 5.15. So he's 32 years old. And all of a sudden, he's out there throwing changeups and working the corners. And I don't know whether he comes to Cleveland, the pitching factory with Willis, and they turn around and they got their video going and they fix this guy or whatever it is. But, he has been a rotation saver for them. And as we found out also, he also is a great watcher for when there's sharks in the water in Miami. He can get the entire team out of the beach because his father ran a commercial fishing business. By the way, that's what happens when the team is winning. You get kind of the fun side stories.
Sure.
So you see him. Logan Allen actually has been up and down. It's not like he's been all that great. But everybody in the bullpen was like, Hamilton and I were talking about Scott Barlow coming in, and he was so on Barlow. I was higher up. I thought Barlow would be pretty good, but Barlow is really, because he pitches all the time. He's been really helpful to have a veteran like that. And Clase, it's like back to 2 years ago now. Just okay, that's it.
He gave up another run today, and
cut him.
I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
It wasn't a save opportunity. I'm like, he might give up a run day. It's just that mental. I don't know what it is with closers. It's not a save opportunity. They tend to give up a run. He did, but he's been lights out. And Hammy told us when he saw him walk into spring training this year, Clase said it was night and day from last year, right? In better shape, better attitude, better focus. And he's just been the best reliever in baseball. Well, his earned run average before today was .30, right?
And one of the dumbest rumors going around was that about Clase, that they would trade him. Of course, teams are calling about Clase. That contract is one for the ages that any team would love to have. But they weren't trading him. They were probably, when they cut about Clase, they'd say, "Oh, that's interesting," and then they probably went into other guys they wanted to trade. But they were not going to do that. And you go back and think that's Corey Kluber.
I know, right?
Corey Kluber, with his arm falling off, traded to Texas for Clase.
Yeah. And what he pitched one game for the Rangers, I think.
Yeah,
is that it?
Actually, he kind of revived about 2 years later, maybe with Tampa Bay.
Tampa Bay, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, he ended up giving up that home run to Oscar Gonzalez.
That's right.
So, but it's fun to look at that. But these guys, I've talked to some of the top people with the Browns, and they're close to Antonetti and Chernoff in that. And they kind of wanted to start to pattern themselves off of what Cleveland's done on the baseball end of it, because, how stability, all that kind of stuff, and that they're able to kind of ride out some tougher things and have, quote, the organization. As I mentioned before about the coaches there, and, Cleveland, around baseball, they're known as the pitching factory. And they'll probably come up with some other starters or something. They just seem to do it.
Now, they may trade for one that we haven't heard of at the All-Star break or at the trading deadline, and I won't question them because give him to Carl Willis and, whatever he was doing, he'll probably be better than that.
Yeah, it has. And the bullpen thing is remarkable. And by the way, when you look at the Royals, they turned around and they hired the bullpen coach from the Guardians.
Yep.
That's right.
And that has helped their pitching staff. There's something, these guys know what they're doing here. In a lot of ways, I grew up in Cleveland. I broke in covering the Orioles in '79 for the Baltimore Evening Sun. And, it was a thing called the Oriole Way back then. Hank Peters and Earl Weaver, and pitcher after pitcher after pitcher. They just did it. And they were even back then, doing it on half the salaries of the Yankees and so on. And they did it by just keep coming up with these pitchers.
Yeah.
And I just saw the same thing. And in some ways, Hank Peters, by the way, came here, and he was the one that first started the revival. Later on, John Hart was able to take it to the next level, and he was another Oriole guy. So it's fascinating to me as somebody who's been around to watch this and see how it's played out.
Let's hope it continues for the Guardians. Let's get a break in, guys. When we come back, Terry, we'll talk some Cleveland Browns. Stefanski and Barry both get contract extensions. Deshaun Watson's actually throwing the football with some zip, according to Stefanski. We'll get into all of that and much more when the RnR podcast continues right here on the Press Play Podcast Network.
What's up, everyone? I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Tybus Powell.
And we are your hosts of the Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need to get you through the regular season, hopeful postseason, and I'd say off-season, Tybus, but is there really ever an off-season for this team?
Thankfully for our podcast, Holly, there really never is when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. Don't miss our breakdown of each week's matchup, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we know, Holly, dogs gotta eat.
Yes, they do. So hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the Orange is Oranger, Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey, everybody. Always want to tell you about our good friends at Cleveland Party Rentals. They're your go-to for memorable events and parties. Now, their approach is very simple. As I've been telling you, they treat your event as exactly as if it were their very own. So they're going to help you alleviate all the stress of the event coordination that you so often get. This way, you see, you can savor the moments that matter. They're dedicated to offering you pricing that's clear and completely free from hidden fees. And that's coupled with one of the most robust cancellation policies in the industry in case maybe you get a change in plans, right? That happens once in a while. They have a tailgate package I want to tell you about. You can lock in your games for the season or even put your Super Bowl party together in the summer so you're ready to go in February. Here's what you get. High quality outdoor screen and projector with immersive sound, double bowl frozen drink machine, a popcorn machine, 2-tap beer jockey box. You get a front row seat. Everybody gets that. It allows you to unleash the ultimate entertainment experience. That game day bundle I just told you about, I know you heard me. It's a complete package that transforms your backyard into a cinematic and gaming paradise. Here's the best part. Ready for this now? Get ready to write this down. Listeners, all of our Reghi and Roda podcast listeners, use code CLEPartiesRock. I'll spell that for you. CLEPARTIESROCK for 10% off your booking. Do it now at Cleveland Party Rentals.
We continue with the Reghi and Roda podcast here on the Press Play Podcast Network, brought to you by Cleveland Party Rentals and Newark Auto Body. Terry Pluto is our guest, outstanding writer for the Cleveland.com website, as well as The Plain Dealer and Books Galore. Terry, how many books have you authored now?
It's more than 30. I'm not sure how many. A couple of them, like The Man with the Sign, is a collection of columns, my faith columns. So there's another one or two others like that. So I'm just glad. Of course, remember, I started covering in 1864, right towards the end of the Civil War. So, really 30 books and what,
Yeah, well,
60 years is really not all that impressive.
And where can people get any of the books, from Loose Balls to The Guy with the Sign and anything in between, Terry?
Amazon's got a lot. TerryPluto.com is a good place to take a look and shop for most of them. And I'm just really, I'm grateful, just like you guys, to have been able to survive in this market. This is our home market, whether, even with Michael being from Toledo, Northeast Ohio or Northern Ohio, all these years. And part of the reason is you have listeners, I have readers, and basically without them, there's no us.
That's a great point.
I'm always very aware of that. And so it's cool when you're on Medicare and they still want to interview you.
Terry Pluto is our guest. Let's talk some Browns football right now, Terry. We'll start with the contract extensions to Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. And I guess the question we'll throw out, and we can all chop it up. Did both of them deserve the contract extensions, or should it have just been one or the other, or not either one of them? Where do you come out on that, Terry?
They've been able to. This is a thing I really believe was probably Deep Podesta's idea, to, when they came in, to hook them together. Their contracts run concurrent, because what were they always fighting before? The infamous internal discord. Remember that phrase?
Yep.
2000
Oh, yeah.
Press conference when Hugh Jackson and Todd Haley went down together, and it kind of hung over the franchise for another year and a half, because later on, then John Dorsey and Freddie Kitchens, all that stuff. So what they wanted to do was avoid the splintering and infighting that they had in the past. Hugh versus Sashi Brown, and Mike Pettin versus Ray Farmer, and even Mike Lombardi versus Joe Banner, and just all that. You could just keep going back and farther, so that at least both of those guys knew that you're almost going to rise or fall together. And that, I thought, was a good thing, given the fact that they did have a relationship, not super strong, but they did. I remember writing a story where I had interviewed Barry. This is several years ago. And he said that when Stefanski came in to interview, this is when Freddie Kitchens got the job, that he went out with Barry, who was an assistant GM at the time, and they were just talking later on. And he said, maybe one day we'll get a chance to work together, because I think at that point they were pretty sure Kitchens was getting the job. And so it was a thing, and they kind of just sort of kept in touch. Stefanski went back to Minnesota, where he was quarterback coach and then offensive coordinator. Barry left soon after that to go to Philadelphia. And I think, by the way, that was a key part of this story, Barry going to Philadelphia, because one, it exposed him to how the Eagles did business. Secondly, he became very close friends with Jim Schwartz.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that was a game changer for the Browns last year. I mean, we could argue whether it was the greatest defense in the world or whatever. It was a much better defense than we've been watching for years. And part of the reason they got Schwartz was his relationships with Barry, because I don't think Stefanski had any relationship with Schwartz, good or bad. I don't think he really knew him.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right with that. And Jim Schwartz, to me, Terry, I think he's one of the top as far head coach. I mean, not so much, but defensive coordinator. I'll take Jim Schwartz running my defense.
Yeah, he's your Carl Willis.
Yeah, that's a great comparison and a great analogy. How about if I say roster building to you, we've both mentioned Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Barry. So Barry's the one that architects it, and it's Stefanski's job to join Andrew Barry with that, but then build it on the football field in terms of, playing the type of football that takes his franchise where they want to be. How do you see the way they've looked to build this roster in their time together?
I mean, hanging over the roster is Deshaun Watson. And we can argue about who pushed for the deal, but the fact is this. You don't make a trade for Deshaun Watson of that magnitude without ownership strongly approving. Because it's going to do two things. One, fracture your fan base. And two, with that contract, you knew it was going to just cause all kinds of havoc with other NFL owners. And by the way, that still is the largest guaranteed contract in terms of just raw guaranteed dollars. Others are
That's right.
But they all, it's the old thing. What the real number is a guaranteed number. So that's what the 6 draft picks, all that stuff. Now, when things went poorly in the old Browns days, you would have heard the whispers of who stuck who with Watson. Everybody would have been running in their foxhole, pointing at the other guy. The GM saying that the coach didn't know what he was doing. They could do it better. The coach saying, you bring this guy in, he's coming off an 11-game suspension, and he's got all this baggage and all this stuff. In other words, everybody had been running away from it. None of that happened behind the scenes. Now, maybe when they argued in closed doors and stayed there, some of it could have come up. So you turn around and you watch how, Barry lost all his picks to be able to trade and move up, in that deal. It was very, very, very costly. Now, one of the areas where we must give Haslam credit for is eventually catches you some, but there's ways around to buy time on the salary cap where you convert these contracts to signing bonuses. But a lot of owners don't want to do that because it rolls a lot of money up front. Haslam, especially after getting $12 million from Warren Buffett for Pilot Flying J, he really doesn't care. He'll do this, and he wants to buy the Bucks, and he wants to buy soccer.
Yep.
And
How about that?
Don't be surprised next year if he buys something else. I don't know what it'll be, but it'll be something. And so, but that has been a good thing. And Barry, cut his teeth in 2 places. He's got an interesting background because he originally was under Bill Polian with the Colts in the pure scouting job, old-fashioned football. Then he rolled into analytics and salary cap stuff. He's a Harvard guy. And I think, especially after being here with Sashi Brown, where they were so analytically oriented, whatever, then I think he's kind of been a good mixture of both. You could argue, okay, maybe some of his first-round picks could have been better, this kind of stuff. But overall, he's been able to patch together a lot of free agents for 1 year that helped them. And then as for Stefanski, it stands to the reason. You look at they went 11-6 with 4 different quarterbacks.
Yep.
Yeah, for me, I had no problem with Stefanski getting the contract extension. How can you, right? 4 years, 2 playoff appearances, 2 Coach of the Year awards. You're not going to argue that, and you don't want to lose him maybe to somebody else, so you lock him up. But with Barry, I feel, and this is weird. I'm questioning that, but I feel better with what he's done than Kobe Altman, right? We'll get to that a little bit later on as we compare, the quarterback thing. If it works, then that looks, like a fantastic move if Watson returns to form this year and they get to the AFC Championship game. But then if it doesn't work, then it falls back on Andrew Barry.
Falls on Barry, whether it was totally his idea or not, we're never going to know. Because Barry Barry and Stefanski, that's like those Guardian guys. They really should be with the CIA. I mean, you will not get the full story on something that goes wrong. They are not going to play that game. They will not do it. And actually, that's how it ought to be. But the fact is, what they both do, they sit there and they go, all right, what can we do to make this guy better? And, they did in 2023. That's when they brought in Schwartz and they redid the defensive staff. And now they're changing things around to try and see if this thing will work with Dorsey, with Watson. I mean, I have to tell you, guys, to me, the bottom line is, and even I remember my wife Roberta said this. Remember, Roberta is the one who saw Stephen Kwan in
that's right,
a Class A player in the year of 2021, and we're watching a spring game in Goodyear. And she watches him take a couple of at-bats, and she goes, I really like him. I think he's going to be good. Now, I mean, she never heard of Stephen Kwan in her life, okay?
Yeah, but didn't she tell you?
Even if she were staring at Baseball America.
He's going to be a star, she told you, didn't she?
He's not there. But the other thing Roberta said, we've been married 46 years and we're all the books and everything. I mean, she edits about 90% of my stories before it even gets posted. She said, so the guy didn't play in, this is Watson, in 21. I said, yeah, it was a crazy thing where he's holding out, the whole time, and he doesn't play at all. And then, so he doesn't play the first 11 games in 22. She goes, well, he's going to be messed up. That's it.
Simple, huh?
Yeah, and it makes total sense. And actually, name another guy who kind of went through all that. And, it's a self-created, but nonetheless, I mean,
but spot on. Yeah.
So right now, as we speak, he has played a grand total of 12 games and only finished 11 in the last 3 years.
They are 8-4 though, with him as their starting quarterback.
Yes.
So if you can talk QB ratings, percentages, completion, they are 8-4. So were you out at any of these OTAs to see him throw, Terry? Were you able to take anything away from that?
Yeah, you could throw a ball 30 or 40 yards and it looked fine.
Okay.
That's it. I mean, they didn't really. The big thing with me, guys, see what you think, is not that I've never questioned whether it's throwing. It's like, are you going to get hurt?
Yeah.
When you're running around all over the place, do you know where you're going? Do they know where you're going? Now, the Browns cling to like this. If you notice, he doesn't really play too many like great games as such, but he has some brilliant halves. And I'm not knocking that. I mean, you could win a game in a brilliant half. He did it with that game in Baltimore where I think he completed all 14 passes in the second half.
That's right. Yep.
6 of 20 or something in the first half.
Yep.
He was all over the place.
Yep.
I remember there was a game in Washington, I think 2 years ago, where it looked like that first game he played in Houston. He's like spiking the ball on the ground and everything else, and all of a sudden he got hot there. And he had like a couple of nice games against Tennessee. The Browns hang on those halves in those games, hoping that that's the guy they're going to see. And I always have to struggle with it's not just all the lawsuits. I just didn't like the trade, even from a football point of view. For a guy who at that point had sat out a year and was facing a suspension. So I have to
controversial to be sure. Yeah. And in the football sense too, as you said, not just for everything that's going on in his life, to come into this particular organization, guys, I get this from both of you. I still contend, if you tell me that Nick Chubb is going to regain health and regain his capability to be one of the most dominant running backs in the game, that'll help Deshaun Watson immeasurably if Chubb is able to be back on the football field and reassume, as I said, his place as one of the top running backs in the game. Watch how much better Watson should become with a healthy Chubb with him for 17 football games and then the postseason, hopefully.
All right, Michael, you're not like this, but my readers would say, and so Joe Flacco was out there with Pierre Strong and all those other guys, and he's seen to put some numbers.
Oh, I've seen all your readers say that. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And it's a fair argument, right, Terry?
Right. I mean, that's the old deny it.
Right.
No, well, to me, I'll just say this way for you guys.
Yeah.
Nick Chubb is special.
Oh, of course.
Nick Chubb is not just some ordinary running back now.
Michael, he was special. I hope he can get back to that.
Yeah,
I have my doubts.
I'm going on what he was the last time we saw him play before this catastrophic injury.
But he's not that anymore. So
how do you know
he?
That? So you're saying you're 100% sure that he won't be able to come back from that?
No, I'm not saying he won't be able to come back from that. I don't think he will ever be at that high level that he once was. This is the second time that knee, right? And I saw the McGahee one in person at the Fiesta Bowl that year, right? And this is what that reminded me of. And McGahee never really was the same, although he continued to play. So if he continues to play, that's fine. So maybe 70% of Nick Chubb, of what he used to be, is still better than Ford or whoever the heck else they have in the running back room.
I think so,
guys.
I think so. But again, all of this remains to be seen. But
Michael,
Terry, again, if Chubb is able to be some semblance of what he's been, I mean, doesn't this make everything about this entire organization better?
Of course. The way they structured the contract, by the way, is so that Chubb will not rush himself back. I think that they're looking at probably October, something like that, to see how he is. Because to Kenny's point, he had a massive knee injury back at Georgia. He made an amazing comeback at that point.
Yep.
When he was drafted, some teams had red flagged Chubb as more of a middle rounder, even though he had a huge year at Georgia because of the knee, the way the medical looked on the knee. So, but he's Nick Chubb. I mean, Andrew Berry has said he wouldn't make this deal for anybody but Nick Chubb. I mean, the medical's horrible, but he is Nick Chubb. He's beat it once, and you look at that and you just say, I'm betting on this. And I loved how Chubb had a very realistic view when he said, they just could have let me go. I mean, that's the fact. Football's tough that way. Yeah, it's $14 million or whatever, but it wasn't, again, not a cent guaranteed. So they worked it that way. So this is the nice thing. And they want to make sure they really give him a chance to maybe come back some in 24 and hopefully really see the full Chubb in 25. I mean, you're looking at, he had 2 surgeries 3 months apart. The first one was for the MCL and whatever garbage else was in there because there's scar tissue and so on. And then the second one was for the ACL. And that is major. But also, he's Nick Chubb.
Yeah.
To your point, Michael, he's Nick Chubb.
Yeah, well,
you want him out.
Again, Kenny knows, admittedly, I'm a huge admirer of the man. I just admire everything about him. I admire the way he approaches his job, number one. But I think number two, Terry, you know this, there's no bravado. There's no sense of self-entitlement or, hey, look at me. And I guess Chubb reminds me of a guy that maybe played in the NFL in the 60s and 70s, and that's how he approaches his business. So, Kenny, to your thing, I get it, but again, I'm going to ride with Nick Chubb until it's proven that he can't do it.
Now, let me say this real quick, Terry, okay? I thought Nick Chubb was the best running back in football before he got hurt. Okay, so I know where you're coming from, Michael. I just have my doubts talking to an orthopedic buddy of mine, surgeon, about what level he'll be back at. Now, to one other thing you were saying, he's their version of Jose Ramirez, right? He just goes out, is the best player on the field, doesn't worry about the money, and you're right, doesn't worry about the endorsements, the ego, and all that. So if he does get back to that, then yes, it will help the Browns out immensely. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, but I'm also holding my breath.
Now, also along with Jose, like I mentioned, Jose working behind the scenes with players. When Kareem Hunt joined the team, one of Chubb quietly became kind of Hunt's, we call him bodyguard, mentor, or whatever. Hunt had one stop by police, and that was it the whole time he was here.
Yeah.
And Chubb was like, we go to Bible study, we do this is how we work. Now, Kareem's always been a worker, but I think it's like he was able to, without telling him, your whole career's on the line, just say, this is how you work. This is what great running backs do. And I really believe that was a key part of Kareem Hunt reviving his career here for a couple of years. Because
couldn't agree more. Very well said.
Trouble.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, one last thing on this, and we'll get to a break, and then we'll talk some Cavs. Here's the thing, Michael. Yes, he will help Deshaun Watson, but this team is going to go as far as Deshaun Watson takes them. So whether Chubb comes back or not, this offense, this team, in my opinion at least, is on Deshaun Watson. And if he does not play well and play 16 of the 17 games, then I don't think they get, past the first round of the playoffs again.
No, I understand that. It's probably not going to matter if the quarterback doesn't play at the level for which they put all of this confidence and faith in him and have him here as as the face of this franchise, right? Yep. I mean, if again, everything we're saying as just streamlined as it may sound, if Watson's not playing well, then nothing positive is going to happen about this.
Michael, I'm not going to go there with that, because I think the fact that they made the playoffs basically last year with Watson won. I'm not going to give them the win in Indianapolis. So he won 4 games for them. And they found a way to win 7 others. There's a reason they not only brought in Jameis Winston, but they jumped at a chance to bring in Huntley when they saw that he was basically available for a minimum contract. They learned their lesson last year. DTR's coming off some weird hip thing. They haven't talked a lot about it, but he's not doing much. So they're loading up with quarterbacks in case Watson gets hurt again. They want to have the making the playoffs as the baseline. And this will be a good test on Andrew Berry. Is he right on Jameis Winston? Can Winston do some sort of Flacco imitation here?
Well, right, but it's just making the playoffs for both of you good enough? Kenny, you and I talked about this a lot.
Look, if anybody starting quarterback gets hurt, Michael, then basically.
Well, of course, I understand that.
Yeah,
I completely understand that. And you don't have Nick Chubb either.
And I'll tell you this one thing: I just don't want to see where the whole thing rides on Deshaun Watson and he gets hurt. Okay, fine, we're 5-12. No, you got to be better than that. And no, you do. You have
indeed.
To
yes.
Your fans pay a lot of money. That's what I admired about last year. Fans paid a lot of money. They hung in there and they got into the playoffs. It was a disaster in Houston, granted, but it was a fun ride. And you're in the entertainment business. And I don't mean entertainment like acting like bozos on the field. I mean, you're in the entertainment business of putting a product on the field that people want to, whether not only watch in person, but talk about all week and watch on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, guys, we got to get a break in right now. When we come back, we're going to dive into the Cleveland Cavaliers, kind of wrap up the season that they had, the move they made, firing JB Bickerstaff, and the search that is going on as we speak for their next head coach. We'll get into all that with Terry Pluto, Michael Reghi, and yours truly, Kenny Roda, here on the RnR podcast right after this.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
Hey, gang, the Roadman, Kenny Roda here from the RnR podcast. If you've been in an accident, first of all, I hope you're okay. Secondly, if you are and your car's not, then guess what? You need to look no further than Newark Auto Body and Zanesville Auto Body. Why? They're safe, they're reliable, their collision repairs are what they do best. It's their business. They are located in Newark and in Zanesville, and they are a local family-run and veteran-owned business serving those areas, Newark, Zanesville, and the surrounding areas. And how about this? They work with all the insurance providers to make your experience hassle-free. We're already down in the dumps because your car is dinged up, right? You don't need a hassle from the insurance company. That's the other great thing about them. Plus, you can ask about their special discounts for U.S. military veterans. You want to check them out online? Here's where you go. autobodyofnewark.com or autobodyofzanesville.com. And to get your repair started today, instead of checking them out online, pick up the phone, do it the old-fashioned way. Call 740-899-4111 and tell them Reghi and Roda sent you.
Looking for new insights on the Cleveland sports scene with a unique side of Cleveland sports history? Then you found the perfect podcast. I'm John Sable.
And I'm Scott Sable, and we're hosts of the Sable Brothers on the Baseline podcast, a podcast about Cleveland sports, but not your typical podcast about the land's sports teams. Join us as we embark on a journey of sharing a unique and historical side of Cleveland sports history with the help of some former Cleveland sports stars and other historical figures.
All right here on the Sable Brothers on the Baseline podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
The Reghi and Roda podcast continues here on the Press Play Podcast Network, and it is brought to you by Cleveland Party Rentals and Newark Auto Body. Terry Pluto, outstanding sports writer for many, many years. You can find him at cleveland.com. You can find him also in the Plain Dealer and on Twitter at Terry Pluto, joining us today. And guys, as we look into this Cavaliers topic tonight, let's start with the season first of all, Terry. They went a step further than they did last year. They won a playoff series, barely, in 7 games against the Magic, and then they bowed out in the next round to the Boston Celtics, who are playing tonight in Game 2 of the NBA Finals. What did you take away from the season that the Cavaliers had?
I thought, given all their injuries, 1 in 48 games was pretty good. I picked them to beat Orlando in 7 because I thought Orlando was going to be a tough matchup for them. And it was, really after you saw how they got drilled, I think they lost the 2 games by a combined 61 points in Orlando. Well, that was it. I mean, a good friend of mine was texting me about how JB is going to be working at Water Restaurant in Akron in another week. I mean, and stuff like that was going on. To me, the interesting thing about JB's tenure here, especially this past season, when it really seemed like not only the wheels were off, but the engine was exploding, they would turn around, whether it was when they went 18-20 when Garland and Mobley were out,
right?
Or how after the collapse, remember, not only did they get drilled by 61 points in the 2 games in Orlando, and as we know now, which I believe from the beginning, and that Jared Allen broke some ribs. I've broken ribs recently. Is November. It's like I was starting to hear this thing go, this guy can't play for a couple of weeks. You can't play with broken ribs. There's not even a way they could, quote, shoot it up, because it's in a different thing. If you wrap your ribs too tight, more than you want to know about this, you could actually impede your lungs. It's again, I fractured a couple in November. So, and I actually broken another one years ago because I just stopped falling down. And that was a thing there. So they won those 2 of the last 3 games without Jared, who had been dominating. And then, of course, they go against Boston. And, out of nowhere, all of a sudden Mitchell's gone. And they played, I thought, 2 decent games without Mitchell against the Celtics. So, and I was writing all the way along. All right, I've had some issues with JB. If not JB, who? You have to give me a name. I don't want to hear, I want a Chuck Daly type or what. He's dead. I don't.
Yes.
I'm serious.
Yeah, right.
This is not how you do it. You have to pick it isn't even like 2 years ago when, Monty Williams and Nick Nurse and some other guys were available. You have to pick from coaches who are available. And so the idea, I think the Cavs feel that JB is not the guy to take them to the next level. So they're probably going to hire a guy who either A, has never been a head coach before, or B, never got out of the first round. Now, maybe that guy will, but I'm just saying it's an interesting thought process leading to yet an even more intriguing conclusion.
Do you have a favorite, Terry? You've heard the names, right? Is there one that you have done research on, or somebody's told you this guy's the right guy?
Yeah, that's a better question for me, because no, but a couple of my close friends in the NBA really like Atkinson.
Okay.
They think
Yep.
that one
Kenny
of them
knows I'm with you there. I like Kenny Atkinson a lot.
Yeah, Mike Fratello was telling me he was coaching the Ukrainian, whatever it is, national team or something. Atkinson was his assistant.
That's correct.
And he said
Yep.
he really began delegating a lot of stuff to Kenny. In fact, he had trouble getting Kenny off the floor and everything else with the guys. He was so there. And then also Michael did some of the games. I forgot one of the years when he did the Brooklyn Nets on TV.
Yes, he did. Yeah, that's right.
So
Yep.
He said he thought he's very high. He goes, Terry, it's a biased opinion. But I said, yeah, but actually it's one that you watched him. And I know Michael well enough where if it was a guy who wouldn't like you and I wouldn't, so you would just say, oh, so-and-so, I wouldn't do that,
Yeah.
This is an opposite. He began telling me these things.
Okay.
Now, a couple other people that I know really like Borrego, he did have 2 interviews with the Lakers, but he basically twice he got Charlotte into the play-in tournament and they got drilled in both games. And that's part of the reason he was fired, even though he's the only guy. This is typical NBA. So you think about JB, they go from 22 wins to 44 wins to 51 wins to the first round to the second round. They have never been in the second round since 1993 without LeBron James, and he gets fired. Borrego is the only guy in NBA history. I forgot how many wins before, but he went from like 33 wins to 40. He had consecutive years of improving his win total by at least 10 games, and he gets fired anyway. And it's in Charlotte. We're not talking about the Boston Celtics.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No doubt. Terry, what do you know as well? The other guy that I do like is Tom Thibodeau's lead assistant coach, Johnny Bryant, with the New York Knicks. What do you know about him, and do you think that he is one of the legitimate few that the Cavaliers may have on their radar?
I know very little. I mean, he's got a relationship with Donovan, but
Correct.
to me, whether it's he or Chris Quinn, not the editor of the Cleveland.com, but the assistant coach from Miami, or some of these others assistants that they brought in. I mean, you look at them, these guys not only haven't been a head coach in the NBA, usually haven't been a head coach anywhere. And so I don't know. Now you turn around and look at, all right, let's name the coaches in the Final Four of the NBA this year. Go ahead, guys. Who are they?
Mazzulla.
Oh, the coaches.
You mean in the NBA Final Four
right now?
Okay.
Yeah.
Mazzulla, Kidd.
Right.
Who else was? I forget who they each play.
There you go.
Yeah,
Carlisle.
Minnesota. Finch. Yeah, Finch and Norrie.
So you have Carlisle, who's sort of like one of the elite coaching classes. He always has a job. You have Chris Finch, whose name people can't even think of. He'd never been a head coach before. And to his credit, he kind of built up Minnesota. Then you have Joe Mazzulla, who stepped in. I mean, who the heck was he?
Right.
Jason Kidd was kind of considered a failure as a head coach in 2 different places.
He was, yes.
Before this job. And they were, so I don't even know what is the prototype when you go to look for a head coach other than, Eric Spoelstra, Steve Kerr, that kind of, I mean, I don't even know how good Popovich is anymore at this age. I'm not just saying it's really hard, he's in his middle 70s, I believe, to do this. So, and you've got Michael Malone. To me, the big three are Michael Malone, Steve Kerr, and Eric Spoelstra.
Right.
That have done the test of time with some teams are willing to stick with them. So that's why I look at these names. That's why, I mean, I was looking even before JB got fired, like who's out there. And that's like I say, all right, don't tell me about coaches you can't get. Tell me about coaches you can get, and who do you want?
Let me throw a name out at you, Terry, and tell me if you feel this way about Dan Gilbert and the Cavs organization. They like to, if someone is close to being qualified, hire from within, right? I've seen that with the Monsters as well as with the Cavaliers organization, front office coaches, broadcasters, things of that nature, right? So there's that family, right? Alex Jensen was a head coach of the Canton Charge. So he has head coaching experience, but not at the NBA level, right? But he's been vetted. They know him. I think we wouldn't even be having this conversation if Jordi Fernandez was still available. I think they would have hired him as their next head coach, but because he too was, in the Charge family with Cleveland. So the wild card to me, and I believe, isn't Alex coaching right now? Isn't he on the bench with Jason Kidd in Dallas?
The other guy is Garrity, who they liked, who did the summer league last year.
And there's a tie there too. So does that carry any weight, do you think, or am I overstating that?
So you're going to take a guy who coached in the G League to take your team to a higher level than JV Bickerstaff.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not. They may think about that. They may do that, but that's. And if you're Kobe Altman, can you go across that bridge?
Well, if Dan decides that's what he wants to do, Kobe won't have a say in the matter.
Right, and I'm not sure how. I mean, Dan's involved, but it isn't as extreme as before. The stroke. Just like I've had broken ribs, I've had strokes in my family, my father, and also another person close to me, and even a lady now that's been like my mom for years. She's recovering from. At 98, she had a massive stroke, right side. And it's just awful. It's really hard. And your energy level, all these things are difficult. Now, you're right about Fernandez. I think they would have hired him. They loved him.
Yep.
So that was a really good name that I forgot all about. Then I saw I got the job, so it didn't matter.
Right.
In fact, if somebody thrown that one to me back at me when I said who, I would have said, oh, that might fly.
Right.
So, yeah, they could. But, man, that's tough because Dan's out of the box hires basically ended up going back in the box.
I do believe, though, that Alex Jensen has ties to Donovan Mitchell as well. Does he not? I believe he was in Utah. So here, let's transition into this then, right? So we talk about the head coach.
Same with Johnny Bryant. That's why I mentioned brought him up.
So there's two guys there. So let's go this way. How much of a factor is Donovan Mitchell, Terry Pluto, in who the next head coach is?
I mean, I think it was if Donovan Mitchell gone in and said, if you want to keep me, you keep JB, JB would be the coach.
Okay.
I don't think Mitchell's way too smart and too savvy to go in there and say, you got to get rid of JB. And, like LeBron actually never would say that. He would just kind of do all this passive aggressive stuff about the very different coaches, but he generally stayed out of the coaching searches and other players have done that. So it could help, but I'm sure Donovan Mitchell just wants a coach. He wants to get to the next round. He's played a long time now and haven't got past the second round. And so he wants somebody to get him there. And I don't, I think what he would be very interested is what type of offense do you want to run? And, and I would want to be interested in, I liked their best backcourt, both statistically and at least from my eyes, was Strus and Donovan. That's your best backcourt. And, Garland, I know they had roll out some stats on him with Donovan, but you could just see it's not a great mix. And so that would be a big, interesting thing for there. But I just believe Donovan wants a guy that's going to show this is how the offense is going to run, and this is how we get to the next level.
What about Donovan Mitchell and his contract extension once this series ends between Boston and Dallas when they're able to talk to him? Do you feel good like all these so-called reports say it looks good for Cleveland? Or do you disregard those and you have no idea? You want to wait and see what he says?
Well, forget the reports. Go on what Kobe Altman said, because if he doesn't sign now, Kobe Altman looks really bad.
Yeah.
And I think no GM wants to go out there and say what he said and then have that guy, you're always leery because at the last second it could backfire on you. But it's kind of like I remember when the Cavs traded for Kevin Love, and they couldn't sign an extension until afterwards, and he could leave. And the Cavs kept saying, even David Griffin kept saying he loves it here, all this stuff. And I was just thinking, boy, if Kevin doesn't sign here, you're going to have to eat that one, and that's a job loser there. So I believe there. But now, secondly, Michael, let me ask you this: if they had just shot platelets into your knee during the middle of the season to try and stir up the circulation or whatever they're doing, and then you came back, your knee was bothering you for quite a while, then you got healthy, and then you ended up in playoffs with the dreaded calf injury, and you're sitting at a chance to go for $208 million extension on top of another $38 million. How do you feel about that, Michael Rabhi?
Yeah, well, I don't feel good. But they've got to
How do you feel about
acquiesce.
$243 million with that as your way of saying, okay,
I say okay, but about the injury situation isn't good. But listen, you have to.
Yeah,
I think
you have to know. I meant if you're representing Donovan Mitchell, what are you recommending?
to Donovan.
Yeah.
That's a tough one, Terry. That's a tough one because again,
And I will also tell you, Donovan, you're not going to the Knicks. They are not trading.
Right.
No. Well,
Their
I would hope not.
cap is a mess. You are not going to the Knicks. I
I would
suppose
hope not.
we could probably talk your way into the Nets if you want to go there. But
Brooklyn, yes, but not Manhattan, huh?
yeah.
Yeah. Kenny will tell you this, Terry. I've been a guy as much as and there have been nights, of course, people have come back at me and maybe try to eat curl. Kenny knows this. I just don't believe that in what the NBA is now. Let's be honest, Donovan Mitchell's may be 6'2" with shoes on. Darius Garland's 6'1". I don't think that it can be ultimately successful, Terry, with this small of a backcourt in today's NBA. I don't care how tremendous the offensive skills are. Then you throw into it the fact that at times I feel like Garland tries to do things that almost like, hey, don't forget about me, as he's looking to one-up Mitchell in terms of the way the ball stops too much.
Yeah, you do. Michael, I agree with every word. And that's why I said their best backcourt is Strus and Donovan. The numbers show it. Strus is 6'6", and his ball handling skills surprised me. I mean, see what Kenny thinks about that. Kenny really, I know he's a streaky shooter, but he's got some toughness. And when they were winning, that was the backcourt.
I'm not a Strus guy. I think he's a bench player. I think if he was any good, Miami would have kept him. So I look at it from that perspective. I look at him as a sixth man, and he would be great. Having said that, I understand where you're coming from as far as pairing people up, because I don't need analytics to tell me Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland don't work. Right? My eyes, I can see that, right?
And your eyes should show you that Mitchell and Strus does work.
During that stretch, it did. Absolutely. Yeah.
And it probably would, again.
I wasn't thrilled when they, got Strus. Was he an upgrade over Okoro? Yes. How much? He's just too inconsistent for me. I think here's what I think, Terry, and I've told Michael this. You have two ball dominant guards in Mitchell and Garland. That's not going to work. You've got two bigs that you can't play on the floor at the same time. I'm sorry. Markkanen, you could because he could shoot the three. neither one of these guys, Allen and Mobley, can't shoot the three. I don't think you can play them together. I think that's what my eyes tell me. And then
one thing, Kenny, it would be
Yep.
interesting to see how Mobley is playing when he reaches where Markkanen it was in his career, maybe about year 4 or 5. Markkanen's played a long time, and his game evolved. I remember when they got him, I thought, oh, this guy's sort of soft and this. Now, granted, he could shoot, but I didn't think he could defend or do the things he did. So I would be it's easy to just say, well, the two big guys, just toss one out when one of them his game is still evolving. He should have been a senior at USC. Nobody ever wants to hear that because it's all one and done. But if you were to, a lot of these other players, if you were to look at where they are in year 2 or 3, and to be fair to Mobley, he did have both a high ankle sprain this year and he had minor knee surgery.
That's true. Yeah. I just don't see the outside. I watch him in pre-games shooting jumpers. That's great. I watch Isaac Okoro in pregame shooting jumpers and making them. That's great. I don't think either one of them is ever going to be a good three-point shooter. And you can tell me all about Okoro's improvement, but when I watch teams say, I double dare you to shoot a wide open three, in a game, that's all I need to know with Isaac Okoro. Yeah, hopefully Mobley can develop.
And Mobley's game's a lot more well-rounded than
it is, but I'm talking about just the shooting from beyond 2 feet.
I mean, fine. I mean, you could get some 6'10" guy that just stands out there and shoots and can't do anything else. I mean, there's some of those.
Right.
I guess you could make a major mistake in this offseason of deciding it's now trying to trade Jared Allen and roll with Mobley and ignore the fact that now you talk injuries. What did we just say he had this past year? Knee surgery.
Yep.
And the dreaded high. I know we have dreaded, but we have there's two dreaded injuries. One is high ankle sprains and the other is calf muscles. It's just like baseball, the oblique.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. As frustrating as he may be at times, and to see him sit there throughout that entire series against Boston was extremely frustrating and devastating to the basketball team. But I don't think you can move Jared Allen, Terry. You got to stay with this young man. I mean, yes, frustrating, but
broken ribs.
Terry,
I get that. I'm not saying
no. We're not questioning that.
I'm not trying to insinuate that he should have played through it, Terry. I don't mean that, but people want to. There's so many Cavs fans I've talked to. Oh, Reggie, they got to get. He's never going. Oh, no, you're wrong. You've got to continue to fortify everything around Jared Allen because I think he is a very good big, very good.
I think his value is as high as it's ever going to be. So if you are going to trade him, now is the time. If you're looking,
why would it be more valuable now than at midseason, Kenny?
Based on what he did in the playoffs before he got hurt.
What about even when he had the regular season? Why can't he turn around, replicate 16 or 11 again?
Well, I'm sure he can in the regular season, but for me, when the numbers go up in the postseason, that tells me that that's more impressive.
If you trade him in midseason, you still have those numbers on the play. I'm just saying,
okay,
to trade him now is foolish.
I'm not going to just trade him to trade him. I've got to get me an athletic wing that can shoot somehow, some way. Now, if that's trading Darius Garland, fine. I'm all I'm down for that.
Garland, like right now, I really do. I want to.
Okay, I have no problem with that either. So I'm looking at either one of those two.
I'm with you on that, Terry.
Because I want
the sooner the better.
Because the thing is, big guys also, contract wise, Garland's contract gets worse and worse every year that passes by. Allen's contract looks better. When he signed that 5-year, $100 million contract, an agent I respect, it's a name that you guys would know very well, said to me, Cleveland got a major bargain. He goes, as this progresses along, he goes, and he didn't think Allen's offense would develop to this level. But he said a $20 million big guy who could defend and rebound like that in a couple of years is going to be a big bargain. They can move him like easy. And so that's why I'm saying, let's take a look at this. I don't want to see, but that I've seen enough of the Garland Mitchell thing to know.
So have I. Yeah, so have I. Kenny, no, Kenny and I have talked about that a lot. I don't think it's going to take the Cavaliers where they think they should be going here in the future. You can't play those two together for 36 to 38 minutes a night. It's just not going to be conducive to winning in big time situations.
It's just fun stuff to talk about because the team is good.
They are
good.
But they've got to get better if they want to challenge the Celtics, correct, Philadelphia.
We're not talking about ping pong balls. We're not talking about guys that haven't shown. I mean, you could debate.
In that regard, you're right,
good
Terry.
Mobley's going to be. Mobley's a good player.
He is.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about a good player. And we're talking about Allen. Allen's a good player. So that's really nice, as opposed to guys who might be good, but so far I'm not sure where their game is going. I don't know if they have the work ethic. I mean, both Allen and Mobley clearly have worked on their games, to try and get better, because I just think that for big Kenny, you've been around. Wayne Ember used to tell us all the time, big men take longer to develop.
Yeah.
As a big guy speaking.
Yeah, right. And a really big guy speaking, right? I like Mobley's game. I liked what I saw the last two games, right? But that was without Allen on the floor. So that's why. And when they went 18-2, what happened? They went 1 in, 4 out, or 4 out, 1 in, right? They only played one center. One big was out there. So that's when they were at their best, even, without Garland, they only had Allen. So if they only have Mobley and they're able to surround him with shooters, that's what I'm curious about. And that's why I would take phone calls on Allen to get the right wing to help make that happen. I'm not saying
a heck of a player.
Well, that's good. GMs find a way to get that done, right? I mean, I wasn't a big fan of Chris Grant, okay? Wasn't a big fan of Chris Grant, but he said, good general managers, it's our job to find a player who's elsewhere, okay, that it isn't working, but we make a trade for him and he fits into our system. Chauncey Billups was the name he dropped. He said, it's my job to find the next Chauncey Billups, who wasn't anything in Boston, but was everything in Detroit. So that's Kobe Altman's job, to go out there and find somebody. And if you have to give up Allen or Garland, one or the other, then that's his job. And that's why I don't have all the faith in Kobe Altman to do that. That's my only, when we go back to what I said earlier about Andrew Barry over Kobe Altman, comparing the two, I tend to have a little more faith in Barry than I do Altman.
I have a hard time picking actually between them. I mean, it's just so different, the sports and where they're at. But the fact is, both teams rose kind of almost out of the ashes with those guys running it. Where most of the time when we see some GM takes over the team, that's what ashes, he tries to burn down what's the rest of the ashes. I mean, it's really so bad. So.
Here's the thing, though, with both of those guys, and we'll wrap it up and get out of here. The Donovan Mitchell trade, if they end up having to trade him, right? Horrible for Kobe Altman. If Deshaun Watson, that big trade doesn't work out, horrible for Andrew Barry. So they both have that one trade with that one player that they pushed all the chips to the middle of the table on, right? And they could end up, both looking very bad if it doesn't work out with Mitchell extending and Deshaun Watson playing well this year.
Yeah, and the hope, and actually, at least the one thing is, if say Mitchell comes in and changes his mind or something, actually could probably get some stuff from Mitchell. You try to trade Watson, a year from now, even with 2 years and whatever's left on that contract, I think $130 million or something. You're cutting him, and so. That is even more reason why I think the Browns turned around and redid the offensive staff, because you look over the cliff and it's a big drop of what to do if Watson doesn't come through. Where if you're Altman, you look over the cliff and it's a drop, but maybe there's a slight parachute so I don't die in the process of going over to be able to make some sort of trade. So
Safety net. Absolutely. Hey, we could go on for another hour, but we've done well over an hour, and it's always fun to catch up with Terry Pluto. Terry, fantastic stuff with us, but always in the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, with all the books. We read you every day. Everybody else out there does as well, and we always appreciate you making time for us.
Oh, I'm glad to do it. It was fun.
Can't thank you enough, Terry. All the best. Right. Give our best to Roberta, too, please.
Yeah, and ask her to scout some people for us, and we'll take her word on who the Cavs should get.
So far has been struggling this year. It was Rokio a couple of years ago. That was her name.
Was it? Okay.
She will tell you, Coco Crisp. That was another one of hers.
There you go.
Well, let her. She could just stick with Stephen Kwan for the time being, because
that one was like, that's
a 5-star A+.
Like, the guy that found Bob Feller in Iowa.
That's right. Yeah, Van Meter, Iowa.
His name. He's a legendary scout. So, okay.
No question.
Great stuff, Terry. Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Do it again soon. Appreciate you.
Bye-bye.
All right, that's it for the RnR podcast. Thanks to our guest, Terry Pluto. Thanks to our producer, Ty Quartz. Michael, always a pleasure. We'll do this again next week. We'll see if the NBA Finals are over. Mini camp for the Browns, and we'll see where the Guardians are at that point, all right?
Absolutely, Kenny. Good stuff as always tonight, and already looking forward to our next venture next week.